It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. Equipment, technology, education. The Northeast's premier outdoor farm event is almost here. Since 1985, producers have been discovering the latest in farm equipment at the New York Farm Show, every February at the New York State Fairgrounds in Syracuse, New York. The New York Farm Show hosts more than 400 exhibitors with the latest technologies in tractors, planters, sprayers, and many other precision ag tools. Join us February 23rd to the 25th. Learn more at newyorkfarmshow.com. Indoors and outstanding, the New York Farm Show. Hi, and welcome to North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. My guest today has a long history of building dairy facilities and installing equipment, which led him to his current role serving dairy producers as Midwest Sales Manager and Key Account Manager for VES-Artex. And VES-Artex is the premier global technology solutions provider for environmental systems in agricultural facilities. So today we're going to talk about planning and designing dairy barns with cow comfort in mind. Based in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, I would like to welcome Joel Hornby. Welcome, Joel, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Chrissy. Appreciate the invitation to your program, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So first of all, just tell me a bit about your background.
So I've worked at VES-Artex since September of 2019. I actually was exposed to VES while I was working in another field for a construction company that was specializing in manure handling equipment and installation. And a couple of the dairymen who we worked for spoke highly of VES at the time. And so I had the opportunity to work in some facilities where their equipment was. And I was impressed with the systems that they were doing and designing. So I sought them out for potential employment after hearing some very good things. And so I started there 3.5 years ago. Prior to working for the construction company that exposed me to VES, I worked in education for 12 years where I coached, did some secondary education, teaching and coaching, taught and coached at the collegiate level. And prior to that, I did a lot of construction work throughout high school and even during summers of college. And then when I was teaching, I also worked construction. So as I transitioned out of education, doing ag construction was very appealing. And I also just have a long history of farm work with my dad, at my grandpa's, with uncles and things of that sort. So it was a perfect opportunity when I made a transition.
Yeah, that does sound perfect. Perfect mix in your background there. And so can you tell me about VES-Artex and the merger back last year in 2021?
Yeah. So VES was a startup company that really was trying to bring a new approach to dairy ventilation. The co-founders came out of poultry and saw a lot of automation and we're doing a lot of strategy there. And dairy was doing a lot of sticking fans in barns to see if they could move some air around.
Mm-hmm.
And so they knew that it could be done better. And so they did, and they were in developing great systems. And then Turntide, a motor company out of Sunnyvale, California, approached VES about becoming a partner with them, and did that in 2020 for part of that year, and then bought out the rest of VES. And so this made a lot of sense, a motor company working with a ventilation company, and had a very unique product as well that had incredible energy efficiencies and promise for lowering carbon footprint on dairies. And then we ended up acquiring a new CEO, Ed Paradowski. And in his leadership, he saw that Artex was doing some very similar things that VES was doing, and realized that there could be some natural synergies there instead of being competitors, if we were actually colleagues and coworkers. And so we did. We joined forces in 2021. And here in 2022, our business has grown 30% as compared to the sum of our businesses when we were separate companies. So there was just incredible opportunities, I would say, for many things. People, processes, products improved in ways that probably couldn't have happened had we not merged, because we had the best of both worlds. VES was very focused in ventilation, but also doing some things with cattle handling and dairy steel in different areas of the United States. Had a very strong lighting portfolio, doing high pressure fogging. Artex was doing incredibly well in central U.S. and cattle handling, doing some ventilation, doing high pressure fogging like we were, but they were doing soaking in a way that we weren't. And so there was just a really good matchup between our companies that complemented each other incredibly well. We got an amazing team, like 94 people, I think.
Wow.
We have engineers, we have veterinarians, we have warehouse assembly, personnel, customer service, marketing, education and training team, technicians, product managers. We've got a digital transformation team.
Wow. That sounds like a fun team to be on.
It is. So with my struggle of weather that I was telling you about before we started up, when I was flying to Fort Wayne, it's like I'd hit the ground, get the blizzard alerts, like, jeepers, I better change my plans. I had all of my plans changed on my phone before I even left the airport.
Right.
I used my Delta app.
It's amazing.
I used my Enterprise app. I used my IHG app. I canceled my hotel. I scheduled and booked a different hotel. I mean, I did all of that in just a few minutes, right? Mm-hmm. And so those are some of the things that we're working on internally with our digital transformation team.
That makes sense. To
provide those sort of services and capabilities within the dairy world. And so it's a fun place to work. A lot of the people who I work with have worked in the ag industry for years in other professions too, whether it be for De La Valle, milk plants, working on dairy farms themselves, or grew up in agriculture. So when you take this eclectic team and you put them together, it's just like a sports team, right? People that come from all over the place, different backgrounds and different skills, and you put them together and it's like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, that sounds like a really robust team and very smart to, instead of working against the two companies working against each other, to join forces. I think that's really smart. Very cool. And you've created a new global headquarters and innovation center. So tell me about that. That sounds pretty interesting.
So as you already mentioned, it's in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. And It's about 100,000 square foot ish, I would guess, facility. And, just like a lot of places, there's offices, conference rooms, warehousing, product assembly, things like that. But we have a test chamber where we can test fan performance.
Wow.
And we have a innovation center where we can actually lay out our solutions and we can mock things up and we can test them. That is no replacement for the dairy barn itself, right? That unique environment, the unique conditions in terms of air quality, the presence of animals. And you want to find out if something's tough or not, put it on a dairy farm.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have the innovation center, but it's a stepping stone to get us to that field testing to make sure things are robust. We are focused on, reliability and performance. We want that for our products and to provide that for dairy producers. And so that's how you do it. You thoroughly test it, you put it through the proper, processes. And it also, that innovation center also serves as an area for training our partners, which we'll be having one of those coming up in the new year.
Right. Yeah. And that's important these days too. There's so much technology. There's so much to learn that it's great when companies can have a place where you can gather and get hands-on without it being on your farm first. And, the risk of doing something wrong on your own farm while you're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that level of comfort, right? I mean, you can show somebody a video or you can tell somebody how to do it, or you can do it. And if you do all three, things are just going to go a lot better.
Yeah. Easier to retain. Everybody learns differently, right? So,
right. Yeah, no, for sure.
So the focus of our discussion today is really designing a new barn with cow comfort as the main priority. So where do you start with a producer who's thinking about building a new barn, new facility? That's
a big question. Mm-hmm. Where you start, right? Because you got to know where you're going to start to know where you're going to finish. I would, before I answer that question, I would say one of the things that's very enjoyable about what I get to do is that it's unique. Mm. And no two processes really are the same. The poultry industry, the swine industry are very much controlled by integration and integrators, and they're very similar. And that's fine, they work well, but dairy isn't like that. And there are key questions that we have, but no two conversations are ever the same. And so one of the first things that we end up doing is we look at the site and we say, okay, where are we located? And we do a weather analysis. We take 10 years of the past weather data, and then we average it out to every single day throughout the year. And we say, okay, if we're going to design a system, whether it's lighting, whether it's ventilation or high pressure fogging, or all those things tied together, how is it going to operate on this dairy in this facility based on those local weather conditions? Because it's going to affect it. It's going to affect its performance. I can remember I was doing some dairy tours in Wisconsin a couple of years ago, and we had 2 weeks of weather where the average ambient air temperature was like -20.
Wow.
That affects your facility.
Yeah.
And if you know that on the front end, you can actually design your ventilation system to be prepared for it, and people don't have to run around freaking out trying to figure out what they need to do to make the change. It's already programmed into the controls, and it can respond to the environmental conditions. So we do that, but that also helps us figure out, hey, is this actually a good site to do high pressure fogging? Mm-hmm. And should we talk about this, or are the humidity levels such that it doesn't really make good sense? It's not a good investment, and we need to focus more on feed line soaking cows and soaking them in the holding area with water and using evaporative cooling off of the animal. Or if we're out west and we can do high pressure fogging, some places for 200 plus days out of the year, you can generate a payback in that and milk production alone in a year.
Wow. That's fast.
Yeah, it's unusually fast, right? That
Yeah.
typically isn't your rate of return. But when you can almost completely remove cows from that heat stress environment through high pressure fogging, it just makes it pay off much more rapidly, right? So we do weather analysis. We look at the geography and the topography, like where is this barn actually going to sit? Is it going to be in a depression? And is it surrounded by what is going to be in alternate years cornfields that have a lot of transpiration through photosynthesis that actually are going to make that microclimate more humid? Do we need to plan for that? And how do we plan for that? We look at windroses, like where is the wind coming from over the course of a year? And we'll look at 30 years of wind data. And then we'll break it down by month and say, okay, what's going to be happening throughout the year? Because when you're designing a facility and you're working with ventilation, the wind is going to be it'll be an influencing factor as to its performance. Where your exhaust fans are located, where your intake is located, and how air is moving into the barn and out of the barn. Neighbors. We like to talk about neighbors. Who's living around the dairy? So there's been situations where we've actually not positioned fans in the place that might have been the most optimal out of respect for neighbors. Existing structures on the farm affect the ventilation system and how air travels. Whether you create actually low pressure spaces between buildings where the air is moving really fast, that makes it hard to pull air into a barn. Manure storage, where is that going to be located? We really don't want our inlet pulling air off of where the future manure storage is going to be. So it's really even just that question, where is the site and what's on it, takes a fairly in-depth conversation and looking at the area. I would say probably the next question after that is, what are your long-range plans? Mm-hmm. We don't want to back the dairy producer into a corner if they're hoping to actually double their herd. Can the barn actually be built as a monoslope? And can we design the ventilation system to be expanded to take care of the future needs of the cows? Or are they just hoping to add a third more? And if they are, can we size high pressure fog pumps using variable speed drives to get it right the first time so we don't have to add more or duplicate? So just some being forward thinking helps a lot and goes a long ways to making sure that their investment is a good one.
Yeah, those are great points. And there's so much to think about. And of course, the choice of milking style has a huge impact, of course, on barn design. So what should producers be thinking about when it comes to milking style? And, in addition to all of the other things you've just listed as well.
Yeah. So, whether somebody's going to use robotics. I was on a dairy once and I actually heard the dad say to the son, do you want to manage technology or people?
Right.
and that was going to be the determining factor of whether they did a robot barn or they put in a new parlor.
Yeah.
So some of those things, but a lot of the questions surrounding, your milking style are questions that surround just facility design in general. Mm-hmm. And meeting the needs of the animal. One of the things that we're focused on is providing an animal-centered environment.
Yeah.
Whether it's a robot barn, whether it's a parlor and holding area, a parallel, or a rotary. And there are different considerations and different things that you have to plan for in each one of those without neglecting the other. I've seen people go gonzos on the barn and not hesitate to provide the best possible environment that they can for the cows. And then you get to the parlor and holding area, and they want to try to resolve budget problems there.
It's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and cut corners.
Yeah.
But when the cows come from the barn and they come into the parlor holding area, it's probably the place where they are at greatest risk for heat stress out of any place on the farm, because they're in close proximity. They've had to move. They got to get milked. They're interacting more with people. So, and if you're in a robot barn and you're not interacting with people, those cows still have to move to an area where the robots are. So they're congregating in an area. So you got to make sure that you get your ventilation right there. Put velocity on the cows. You want it to be comfortable for them. You want to have good milk let down. When she's stressed, she doesn't let down her milk as well. So there's just all kinds of things surrounding the parlor holding area. We have a lot of folks on our staff. If I could go back to the team of folks that we have that have worked in their previous careers for Bomatic, for De Laval, who that I often use as resources and ask questions of. Okay. Doc Wolf, Doc Brady, some of our veterinarians that are on staff, just talk to them about size of the facility, making sure that if we're in a parlor holding area scenario, whether it's a parallel or a rotary, do we have enough volume per cow? Because volume in the holding area gives you air quality, and it's harder to erode the air quality when it's larger. When it gets smaller, it's much easier for that air to get bad faster. Now you have to turn the air over quicker and get it out of there. You have, depending on the size of the rotary or parallel, and you have 500 cows in that holding area, and each one of them can produce the amount of heat from a hairdryer running for an hour. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of heat.
That is.
So you make that holding area smaller, and you've just intensified the amount of heat that they're going to be putting off, and that it's going to heat up faster and require that the system respond faster. Cows don't change. The more consistent you can make it, more smooth transitions that you have in how your systems operate and the environment,
right,
the more comfortable the cows will be, the better they'll perform. So, each one of them requires a unique approach. In that parlor holding area, if they choose to go with a rotary, are they going to have a palpation rail? Are they going to hold cows in there? Mm-hmm. If they are, you now have a different kind of environment right next to this environment where you've got 500 cows waiting to be milked. And now I got a few cows over here. Well, how do you ventilate these few cows over here? I got all this heat over here.
Yeah.
You really have two different environments there. Plus you have your parlor environment, and they're kind of tied together. So that's one of the things that we bring to the table for dairy producers, for our partners, is working through those strategies and figuring out how to do the ventilation, the lighting, the high pressure fogging, the soaking, tying all those things together, because they all need to work together, not just for the cow, but for the employees.
Yeah.
You want good help. You want to retain good help. if you provide a great environment for the cows, it'll be a good environment for people to work in too.
Yeah.
And so there's that to consider too when people are doing that. The other thing is the longevity of the building. A well-designed ventilation system greatly enhances the building longevity, how long that building will last. You're getting noxious gases out, you're bringing fresh air in. So it all works together with that cow, making
just
her
like
the
our homes too, right?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
I don't know. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if I completely answered your question, but there's a whether it's the parlor holding area or it's the barn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Dairyman or dairy woman, the dairy producer, do you want to build a cross vent? Do you want a wide body tunnel? Do you want a tunnel vent? Because most folks, when they get into this, building project, they already kind of have an idea of what they want.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fleshing out, well, why is it that you want to do that? And lots of times the reasons are right and they're spot on. It's like, okay, perfect. But sometimes the reasons they thought they wanted that change in the process, or they go visit a facility.
Yeah, that's important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They thought they wanted a cross vent and they go to a wide body tunnel vent and they can see all the cows and it's light and they talk to the dairy producer, and that's huge, right? When dairy producers can talk to dairy producers, you're chewing the same dirt. It's like when a coach goes to a coaching clinic. Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, this is, I need this.
Yeah. This worked and this didn't. And we change this next time. Or, that's really valuable.
It's another fun thing that I get to do. I get to help facilitate some of that. Somebody's at point A, right? And they want to get to point B. I love helping people get there. Yeah. And then doing it really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned before about, trying to fit budgetary constraints, and, you get the walls up and you get part A done, part B done, part C done. Ventilation isn't always the first thing that a producer thinks of, right? But if they don't think of it, what can poor ventilation lead to?
I think there's two different categories that I want to answer that question in. And the first one would just kind of be overall general. If you don't get the ventilation right, you're going to have poor air quality. It could be year round, or it could be seasonal. Maybe you don't get the minimum vent right. Either one isn't good, right? I mean, you could end up with pneumonia if you don't get the minimum vent right. Well, you can get that in the wintertime too. It's just less likely. In the summertime, you can get heat stress because you haven't properly designed the barn for air changes and CFM per cow to live well all year round. So poor air quality, you could have a poor working environment, like I mentioned before, a building that won't last as long. I would say specifically, you'll probably see an increased risk of lameness because cows that, aren't given good fresh air and cooled properly will stand more and they'll perch. So it puts an uneven displacement, on their hooves. Reduced preg rates. So when cows get heat stressed, this negatively affects their oocytes quality. It affects embryo viability. You'll see more aborted calves. Dry matter intake will reduce. Milk production will go down. Cows will just in general have a depressed immune system so that their somatic cell count will go up. Increased incidence of mastitis, respiratory infections. I mean, just any sort of disease, right? It doesn't have to be those things. Those are just the things that we typically see. If you think about it, it's a lot like us, right? When do we get sick?
when we're in the air conditioning or in the heat, in the
exactly. And when
Right.
we're stressed.
Yeah. And stress. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
stress reduces your immune
Yeah.
response.
Yeah. And not proper airflow, right? Here in Florida, our cold season is in August because everybody's inside.
Yep.
Up north, it's in the winter, right? When everybody's inside. So it just makes sense.
The other thing that people realize now, dairy producers realize that we didn't realize before. And thankfully, there's a lot of great research that goes on in the dairy industry, right? And a lot of this comes out of University of Florida, and you may be familiar with the work that Dr. Dahl's work on cooling dry cows and what effect that has on calves.
Wow.
So as they're carrying calves, dry cows that are not cooled well have lower birth weight calves. They have calves that have depressed immune system response. The calves typically show lower milk production over the course of their life.
Wow.
Those dry cows have lower production in their lactation and following lactations. So, I mean, you're not just dealing with the immediate in terms of your ventilation, you're always influencing your future too.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And really this keeping the body temperature consistent year round is so important. And so I'm assuming your high pressure fogger. Can you tell me more about how that works? And I'm assuming that that's to maintain that body temperature, right?
Yeah, it is. And so if your weather is such that you have days where your humidity is, below 60, 55%, and you can push the humidity in your barn up to 75, 80%, when you add water vapor to the air or not water vapor, when you add a mist of water to the air and that water evaporates, it takes heat for that process to occur, and it actually causes the air temperature to drop. It's called ambient air temperature drop. So it may normally be 85 degrees in your barn, but if the humidity outside is 50 and you can push the humidity up to 75 or 80, you can drop the temperature in your barn down to 75, 72 degrees. That's significant.
Yeah, definitely.
You have taken that THI, down to a mild. So you greatly mitigate that risk. And so now she's able to eat more. She won't stand as much. She'll lay down more. She won't go stand at the water and try to cool herself there, or stand in the water because it's one of the ways she will try to cool herself. The other thing is with high pressure fogging that often is overlooked is you actually conserve water with high pressure fogging.
Really?
If you can achieve that sort of ambient air temperature drop, you don't have to run your soakers for cow cooling. So you can minimize water loss there. We have another strategy for that, by the way. Intelligent soakers. Don't let me forget to tell you about intelligent soakers.
Yeah.
But she won't have to drink as much either. Drinking water is one of the ways that they stay cool. And just like any living creature that drinks a lot of water, they urinate more. And so you're putting that water back into your system, into your manure stream in some way, shape, or form. But through high pressure fogging, you don't. So when you look at the balance sheet, you really, if you are able to do it, it is best to high pressure fog and soak, because there are times when you won't be able to high pressure fog. Weather conditions won't allow it.
Right.
And then there's advantage that can be gained from soaking. And in some climates, there are some places in Wisconsin where it doesn't make sense to high pressure fog. The number of days you can run it, the number of days it would just be on and off, they don't justify it because the humidity's higher. So then soaking is the key. But then there are ways to save waters there. One of our value propositions is sustainability.
Yeah.
And that is helping dairy producers conserve resources. And it doesn't matter what line of work you're in. There tends to be some that don't care, but I haven't met many dairy producers that don't care about the environment. I'd say 99% are care.
Best stewards of the land.
Exactly. Yeah. And so intelligent soaker is, and that's one of the things that we're doing, is that it fits with our value proposition. Is we have a photo or a ultrasonic sensor.
Okay.
That is sits beneath the nozzle of the soaking, and it will only soak when a cow's present.
Really? Oh, that's cool. Technology is amazing.
It is. And then
so do they learn then to go there when they need it?
Well, generally she'll get up and she'll go eat, right? When she's hungry. Okay. And so when she's there, it will turn on and soak her for a minute, and then it'll shut off for 6 minutes. And if she's still there, it'll turn back on.
Wow.
If she's done eating and she went to lay down, and there's not another cow right next to her, it won't turn back on. And so you can significantly reduce your water usage, 50%, based on different flow that you have for cows at the manger eating. But that ties in with just your cooling, and the strategy for that. It's critical that you get, high pressure fogging is important. Even before that is just making sure that cows have very good air velocity over them.
Yeah.
Whether you're in a cross vent barn or you're in a tunnel barn, is a 5 mile per hour airspeed over the top of that cow will optimally cool her. It'll help through convection heat loss. It'll help to wick away the heat and keep her cool. No different than us, right?
Yeah.
If you're hot, it feels great to stand in front of a fan.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And how can the barn design promote hoof health as well?
Having a properly designed stall, one that's inviting. Cows are very unique in the way that they lay down and the way that they get up. They have to be able to lunge forward. They have to be able to do a head bob. They have to have sure footing. If they don't have those things, then they stand because they're reluctant to lay down. And that's hard on their hoofs. If you stand in one spot, it's hard on our feet too. Now your feet start to hurt after you stand for too long in one place. So having that stall be an inviting place. Cows are prey species, right? And so when she walks in, she likes to be able to see everything. And so having, your beams that support your stall system spaced properly so she can see well, not having a restriction where she might hit her head when she lunges forward to lay down, making sure she's not going to hit her chin on something when she goes to get up, because she'll remember that.
Yeah.
Not having too large of a brisket, because when she stands up, she's got to stick her forelimb forward. So, doing all of those things are critical for good foot health. And you might not necessarily immediately think of stall design for foot health. Most people think, well, I should have rubber on the floor. Well, yeah, I mean, in certain places, it probably would be a good idea. High traffic areas, maybe at the feed bunk where she stands to eat. I recently was in a facility where they had it on the crossovers, where the water was too. I thought, oh, that's a good idea. They're standing here and drinking. It just adds a level of comfort.
Yeah.
So that can be good for hoof health. Having a trusted hoof trimmer that does an excellent job. Making sure your concrete floors are done well from the beginning, that they're grooved properly.
Right. That's important. For
traction, and that they're not too rough. You know, when we were building barns, one of the things we would do is before we had startup, cows came in, we would take that skid steer with that bucket, that blade of that bucket, and we would run it up and down those scrape alleys.
Wow. Just
to make sure we didn't leave any burrs or anything like that. Yeah. That's one of the fun things about coming into this VES-Artex team and working in the dairy industry previously, is having some of those experiences and being able to VES-Artex offers so much more because of our human resources that we have.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And then, so what about an existing barn? So what can you provide producers or advise them when they already have a barn, they don't want to redo it, and they want to use what they have? Great question.
So there's incredible potential in retrofitting a barn. And let me preface it by saying this. I've never retrofitted a mechanically ventilated barn to a natural vent.
Okay.
Right? Nobody ever takes fans out and makes their barn a natural vent barn.
Yeah.
The reason is because mechanical ventilation gives you the best environment for the cow. It gives you control. It gives you stability of the environment. Cows don't like change. You get to determine what the air quality is, what the airspeed is, so you make it an animal-centered environment for her. You're not waiting for the wind to blow. You're not hoping that you get air turnover and minimum ventilation and air actually makes it out of the ridge line. It's not that natural ventilation is bad. It does work. It's just mechanical ventilation has advantages that natural ventilation just they can't provide.
Yeah.
So in a retrofit, when we go in and we're looking at a natural vent and they want to convert it over, probably one of the most important thing is just to start by identifying, okay, what are the positive things that we got going on here that you don't want to change? Maybe they already have velocity fans blowing on the cows and they're doing a good job with that.
Yeah.
Okay. If it's working, here's something that we could potentially do that would improve it. Do you want to improve there? And there's always a budget. So maybe that's not the best place to invest the money. Maybe it needs to be in tunnel ventilating it and doing air exchanges. Maybe it's a really long barn. Maybe it's 1,500 feet long, but we want to tunnel ventilate it. But we want to go one direction because of the site layout. We can use some fresh air injection fans to push some air into the facility and then suck the bad air out. Mm-hmm. So understanding a lot of the same things on a new site, right? But there are also things that are there that we need to consider. How are we going to use what's here? Or are we going to replace? And why are we going to replace it?
Yeah.
And it's a matter of just making the plan and executing that plan. Site visits are hugely important. You can look at a building plan, but until you've walked the facility and looked at the nuances of how the building's connected with other buildings and how that's going to affect ventilation, where's the manure drop? How are they moving manure? Are they using a vac truck or scrapers? If they're using a vac truck and we want to put fans in a particular spot, is that going to work? Is the truck going to hit them? You know, what are their crossovers like? Do they use skid steer traffic over crossovers? Just all kinds of things that you don't see on paper.
Yeah.
important discussions to have in a retrofit. Whether we're doing a greenfield site or whether we're doing a retrofit site, we have some guiding, principles that we're following. We are trying to create an animal-centered environment. We're trying to hit certain KPIs with regards to air changes per hour, CFM per cow, airspeed in the barn. And so, balancing all of those things help us determine a plan for here's what would be best. And then having a discussion of what it is that we're going to do to help the dairy producer improve and gain operational efficiencies. Sometimes automating.
Right.
We have a cloud-based system called Dairy Boss that is able to send alerts. And within some of our systems, our maintenance can be proactive instead of reactive. Well, that's a huge savings. You have less downtime. Reactive maintenance is always more costly, right? Oh, I got to hurry up and get it. As soon as you hurry up and get it, somebody makes a mistake because you're hurrying. And there's downtime associated with it. If you can be proactive in your maintenance because of your automation, that's a huge savings. And the folks that are managing all of that are under less stress. So they just work better. The cows are better off. So it's kind of a domino effect.
Definitely.
With regards to having the right information and how you control your system.
And that's really the story for all of ag tech right now, whether it's in the field, whether it's with the cows, whether it's just how do we leverage technology without data overload, without, getting the adoption process in. And but it's really incredible what it can do to increase those profit margins and make life more enjoyable for farmers as well, rather than just being a slave to the farm.
Yeah. Well, you go back to some of those other questions you asked. Well, what happens if you don't get the ventilation right for the cow? What happens? Well, what happens if somebody forgets to open the curtain the right amount?
Yeah.
Well, I end up spending more money on electricity because my static pressure is way too high. I got additional stress on my fan blades because they don't have the amount of inlet that they need. It doesn't mean that you're not ever going to have problems. It just means that you can program it, then you can make adjustments and you can fine tune it. And 99% of the time, it works the way it's supposed to.
Right.
And if you have some alerts and you are able to get some information, not just data, but you can get some helpful information from your system so you know what to do next, then you can avoid that other one. Some of that 1% of the time will always have problems, but if you can minimize them and the severity of them, then
that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Life's just better
for
the cow, and for us.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. So switching gears a little bit, you've mentioned sports a lot through the talk, and you've played some professional football as well in Europe. So how did sports shape the person that you are today? You can already say it's like a team. It's this, obviously your work ethic and your ability to succeed in a team setting. Definitely.
Well, let me first preface, you said I played professional football. So I did. I played professional football in Germany for 2 seasons, and I made enough money to buy groceries and pay for the bathroom.
And have a cool story.
I was appalled when I went to live in Germany. I lived in Rüsselsheim, Germany. And the first time I went to use the bathroom, I had to pay for it. And I wasn't ready for that. And so, anyways, I wasn't over there to make money. I loved playing football. I loved coaching. I had some incredible coaches that helped me grow and helped bolster, some of the things that my mom and dad and my grandpa and grandma and just family and people were instilling in me. And so because of all of that, I developed a love for the game. And so I had an opportunity to go over there, and I was hoping that could be a stepping stone, and it was, but it wasn't what I was thinking it was going to be.
Yeah.
I was a player coach. And when you're a player coach, you're in a very unique situation that you have to be able to assess your teammates and your players, because that's what they are. You're playing with them on the field, but you're also coaching. So I had to assess their skills, develop a plan for improvement. Then I had to execute it to get them where we needed to be. But I also had to do the same thing for myself. Then in practice, I had to make sure that I was at least trying to get the same amount of reps that they were, because you have to do that to be able to be in playing shape, and you put yourself in situations so that you can respond, in a game. And so it caused a new level of focus that I never had to have before.
Wow.
So that was huge. I would say, with regards to, how did it help to further shape, and how did it improve my work ethic and working in a team? It was really fun in that I was playing with and coaching Germans, Swedes. We had one teammate from Portugal, Italians, and Americans. So we had kind of a, earlier I said we had an eclectic group at VES-Artex that's made a great team. We kind of had something similar there, just from different nationalities,
right,
like that made it fun. And just like anything, communication was hugely important, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you have a little bit of a language barrier, needed to be able to show them exactly what we needed to do. Helped me slow down a little bit too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In that process.
Yeah. Yeah. And
to make sure that
purpose.
Do you understand? Because a lot of times we might understand, we just haven't accepted
right,
what it is that we are trying to understand. And so that was important. It was a crucial time in my life, right? Because I don't remember how old I was when I went over there. I think it was like 23.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a country where I didn't know anybody. The process was a little bit of a risk anyways, because my defensive coordinator came to me and said, "Hey, you want to go to Europe and play football?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "Well, I had a coach from over there call me, and they heard of you and would like you to come over and try out for the team."
Wow.
I was like, "What? Like, come try
That's
out.
so cool.
What if I don't make?" I was like, "What if I don't make the team?" He was like, "Well, they'll fly you home." I was like, "Oh, that's kind of stressful." So I fly over there, and I played in a game. They just put me in a game. We had a game that Saturday against Stuttgart Scorpions. So not only did I have jet lag, but then it's like, all right, jump in the game. Just
see what you do.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you know what? A lot of times that's what the dairy world is too. I mean,
just jump in. There's no trial days on a farm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get ready to respond.
Yeah.
And work.
Oh, that's cool.
It's one of the reasons I love working in dairy.
Mm-hmm.
And I still get to go to the farm.
Yeah.
Now I get to help others. And so it's a kind of a continuation of what I experienced when I was growing up. It's a continuation of what I was doing in the classroom and coaching too.
Yeah, it sounds like. Yeah. And that leads right into my last question, which is, what's your greatest passion in all of it?
Oh. I would say making a positive difference on the dairy farm for the producer and for the cows. I get a tremendous amount of satisfaction knowing that what we're doing will improve what they're doing.
Right.
I was driving in the car with my wife down I-94. I remember exactly where we were. We were almost to Black River Falls, and I was talking with the dairyman, and he said, "Hey, I really appreciate what you did in our cross vent barn." He's like, "That barn has never performed so well." And my wife was sitting next to me, and she just looked at me and smiled. And it was a good thing I had ears in my head, because the smile on my face would have popped the top of my head off if I didn't have ears to stop it.
Oh, that's great.
But I love that. I love making a positive difference. I think the work that farmers do is hugely important. They're feeding people. They're caring for the land. They are providing livelihoods for people. I think it's the greatest profession. It's one of the greatest professions. I have to preface that, because I greatly appreciate my pastor, who brings the word to us. And so as soon as I said that, I kind of thought, wow, okay, it's one of the greatest professions. They're just incredible people.
Yeah, that's awesome. So where can people find you if they want to talk to you about starting planning for a retrofit or a new barn?
On their farm, if they want. They can find me on their farm.
Yeah.
Probably best is cell phone or email. At the gym, in my office. I don't have all of those handles that you often
right.
that people are able to dole out these days. But if they contacted VES-Artex, which is really easy to get a hold of,
we'll
anybody
provide
there,
all the links too.
Yeah. And you've got my phone number too. So
awesome.
And we work with a pretty amazing dealer network too. We've got a lot of folks out in the dairy world who we work with to help deliver services and product and systems and things too. So
that's good. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your time. It was a great conversation and lots to think about.
Greatly enjoyed it, Chrissy. Appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for your program and efforts.
And thanks to all who are watching or listening. As I said before, if you want to learn more, all the links are provided in the show notes. So go look there. And don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on YouTube, Rumble, Telegram, or Ag Fuse channels. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day. Thanks so much for listening to today's Ag Spotlight episode, where we put the spotlight on people and companies doing great things for the agricultural industry. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, or on your favorite podcasting platform, and give us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on YouTube and Rumble to see the video version of Ag Spotlight. Also, head on over to NorthAmericanAg.com to subscribe to our Industry Connect update newsletter. If you're interested in advertising opportunities, email us at connect@NorthAmericanAg.com. Thanks for listening. Our newest podcast by North American Ag is called What Color is Your Tractor? The stories behind the ag brands you love and the ag brands you love to hate. Hosted by me, Chrissy Wozniak. We take a deep dive into the companies that have built modern agriculture. Subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Go to whatcolorisyourtractor.com. Available on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.